Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport Singapore 2023 May 18 webinar. Thank you for everyone who has registered and joined today's session. We are going to focus today's webinar on the urban logistic transport. And in today's subject, we will be focusing in discussing the mall and retail logistic, especially on the food and cold chain delivery best practices, challenges, and things we can do together. Because I think for the quick intro and setting the stage for the discussion, because during the pandemic and post-pandemic, here we in Singapore see lots of the shopping malls and retail establishments have changed the mix and nature of that. That includes some of them move away from the normal retail towards the services, F&B and fast food and all that. So that poses a different kind of challenges to the mall operation as well as on the road transport surrounding in out of the shopping malls. I don't need to give too much example. I think we remember when we would leave the shopping area in Orchard Road, Orchard Turn area towards the evening after we finish our meal. You can see the lines of trucks and refrigerated trucks going in and out of those areas in queues. So today we are very privileged to have a few of the very expert speakers and industry practitioners who will be addressing the audience as well as sharing their experience. I will start with the lady, Kelly Tan. She is the head of country for Julio. And she has been in the logistics and transport industry as a female professional for years. She's also our vice chair lady of the WILT, Women in Logistics and Transport. Joining Kelly, we have Mark Tan, the general manager of Martin Brower Singapore. Mark has a wide range of supply chain, transportation in various industries, including oil, gas, automotive, and technology. So thanks to Mark. And also his colleague, Alan Ng, he is the head of operation, Martin Brower. He has been with the company for a long time and has tremendous experience in supply chain, as well as in the moving of heavy goods, multinational, as well as established Singapore companies. So without further ado, I would introduce and have Kelly to kickstart her presentation. So Kelly, since you are a lady in this industry and look at things from a very, very, very detailed and thorough manner. So I hand over the presentation to yourself to share with all our audience, and we will reserve time for us to ask Q&A towards the later part of the presentation. Kelly, over to you.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, Kelly.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be able to share one of the topics that I'm probably more passionate on as compared to maybe the men on this panel. They probably don't need as much food as I am, despite how I look. I love food, so I would say that malls and retail logistics involving food has always been something that I'm very passionate with and close to my heart. This is the flow of how I intend to start today. I will start by having a little bit of an industry background. I'm coming today more as an SME, a small and medium enterprise, having worked with a couple of companies that is in food chain in the last couple of years. And what are the key challenges that a small and medium enterprise face? Unlike MNC, which Mark and Alan will probably share a little bit more later. And what are some of the mitigation measures that we as SME take from our point of view? Okay, a quick intro or a little bit more about myself. I think just now Edward has kindly introduced me. I have been always in supply chain since I graduated about 20 years ago. Currently the country head of Julio, Singapore's largest and Southeast Asia's fastest growing digital haulier today. And we enable containers to be moved seamlessly and efficiently on land in few countries in Asia. So before that, I was also had the experience of being in the food industry with Martin Brower, as well as meatlovers.com.sg as an external consultant. I also serve as a board director with the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. So enough of myself, let's go to the topic that we're going to discuss today. A little bit about the background of Singapore malls and retail logistics. A few key numbers that I managed to pull from various sources on the internet. We can see that in the year 2010, there was only about 8,500 F&B establishments. So these are big, small, standalone individual. It has grown to about 13,000. And just before the start of the pandemic, we're looking at about 13,700. Couldn't get my hands on the latest, but it wouldn't be too far off what we are looking at this point. If we look at the malls, the number of malls, it has also increased in just a short 3 years from 171 to 207, which is a good 21% increase. So what does this tell us about the industry as a whole? It is a very fragmented industry, even though you do see visible number of chain stores, but a significant number of them are actually the small and medium enterprise. Now, as a small and medium enterprise, the challenges that we face is very specific and unique for the matter of fact that we operate, I would say maybe in a silo. I think the first one we all probably acknowledge is manpower challenge. Being in the retail industry is a very laborious and a very long working hours job. As a small company, we actually do not have quota for foreign nationality, but yet we are unable to attract local talent purely due to the nature of work. And there's also this challenge of competing with MNC, not just for the recruitment, even if we manage to recruit them, how do we retain them in the long run? Besides the manpower, I would say that lack of subject matter experts within the industry is also a big challenge for SME. People that is very specific, with specific knowledge in the cold chain management. What is it that we are looking at? What are the challenges that we face? How do we mitigate cold chain risk? And also qualified QA QC personnel that knows exactly what is the requirements that is put forth on the SME that is dealing with food logistics. Of course, as an SME, I would say that one of the biggest challenge is really the lack of economies of scale, which leads to limited ability to optimize productivity and efficiency. It is just not possible with the quantum that SME is transacting on a daily basis. Now, with that in mind, as an SME, what are some of the key challenges that we actually face? I would like to touch on a few that I think is more important as an SME as compared to, say, being an MNC. I have 4. I shall elaborate a little bit on each one. First one is on security. As we know that Singapore, with its current economic and financial capabilities, there is a significant consumption of high-value products, such as high-end seafood, Japanese Wagyu, and premium alcohol. The higher the dollar value of the product, obviously, the higher the security risk. And that leads to corresponding increase in the risk of pilferage. In the Singapore retail mall delivery process, a lot of the time when delivery process is happening, when a driver is delivering the product, more often than not, the truck and the product are actually not attended to. Of course, we can try to lock it, we can try to secure it, but there is always this risk of food tampering that is prevalent in the market. It does not happen often, but it has happened before. And in general, I would say crime rates are usually higher in urban area, which is also where retail logistics usually happen. Thank God this does not apply to Singapore, but that doesn't mean that it's zero. I'm sure that I saw the 2 co-speakers are also nodding their heads. I think in our last years of being in the food industry, we do have a fair share of scares of security risk or actual pilferage that has happened that we need to further mitigate no matter how much we have done. But besides just the security risk, I would say that as a maybe not just a SME, but in general, for the matter of fact that we are operating in Singapore, there is a limited space, there's a limited space, and space is always a constraint. Space in Singapore comes at a premium price. The more urban, the more premium the cost. The more central we go, the higher the cost. And that being said, we can also see that as a restaurant owner, as a landlord, they also have very different objectives. So as a landlord or as a mall management, they want to maximize income. So they are looking at per square feet, exactly how much they can charge their tenants. And as a tenant, for a restaurant owner, for F&B owner, we are looking into maximizing customer seating. So then where does the product storage space comes in? It becomes pushed all the way, or rather all the way down in terms of priority. So it is very limited space. The picture that you see on the right is a luxury. A lot of times we do not even have any walk-in facilities. It could be just a few 6-door chillers and freezers in many of the restaurants. If you were to take a peek at the kitchen the next time you are in any F&B outlet. And this limited space that is carved out just for storage leads to frequent delivery, which again then translate into higher cost of operations. And remember, as an SME, that has a double whammy effect on the entire operations model of the business. And with a limited storage space, it also makes it difficult to actually store products at the correct temperature, thus leading to potential spoilage and wastage as well. So this is a very real problems that a lot of SMEs or a lot of individual restaurants owners are facing. I want to maximize customer seating, but yet I need the space that is for storage, which is not generating revenue. Moving forward, what is the third key constraints that a lot of SME face? If we look at the whole movement of products from the time that it is being imported to the Singapore port, we have the main bulk of a haulage, and then we have the domestic and cross-border before it goes into the distribution. Where we are really focusing on today is the blue circle. So it's the retailers and the consumers. You can see that all these locations, which could be shopping mall, standalone restaurants, industry area, grocery stores, HDB flats, condominiums, or landed properties, are the target area where the retail logistics happen or where the malls are located. There are very specific key challenges that SME face in the last mile of their delivery. A lot of the streets are very narrow. There's usually no designated, or even if there is, maybe 1 or 2 designated parking area. And most of the time that is limited, or sometimes no loading and unloading bay at all. And a lot of malls actually have restricted delivery timing where you even need to pre-book. And if you miss your slot, then you queue all over again. And of course, with that constraints, there is always the risk of getting summons and fine if you are not adhering to the rules to the T, should any inspectors come around where you are doing your delivery. And this has a lot of impact on small restaurants operator, where all the delivery volume are actually not efficient. Coupled with limited storage space, it makes it even worse, resulting in high operating costs and also a challenge to be on time. But that is not all. Besides all these challenges, there is always this constant nagging that we are hearing on the, I want to say almost daily basis now, on sustainability. While we have all these constraints, and yet we need to be sustainable. Unlike a normal truck, a reefer truck has a lot higher fuel consumptions, and it takes between 15 to 25% of the main engine consumption just to cool the box down. So this makes it extra challenging as compared to someone that is maybe not in the food logistics, where it could be just an ambient truck and you just run it around Singapore. And since we mentioned that a lot of the deliveries are on multiple drop points because we are delivering very small delivery and to many different delivery points. The multiple drop point distribution also result in temperature fluctuations because of the frequent door opening. That requires even more power. And of course, all these higher power consumption has a significant environmental impact, where the emissions from the delivery vehicles also contribute to the air pollution, to greenhouse emissions. And there is always this constant push on finding sustainable transport solutions that will reduce emission and improve efficiency. We are starting on our journey. I would say that there is a lot more to go, but I would like to just quickly share on two business case that has been near to us in Singapore. I think first one is the use case of a biofuel as an alternate fuel source. In the write-up from Straits Times just a couple of weeks ago, we have seen that Singapore is actually pretty active in this aspect. As at end of 2022, we have already delivered about 70,000 tonnes of biofuel for ocean-going vessels. Singapore Airlines today is also using a blended sustainable aviation fuel that is mixed of, there's a mixture of used cooking oil and animal fats. Next is really to look at how can we extend that into the land transport in terms of using biofuel as an alternative. But that being said, what is it that is already in the market? It's already the launch of EV vehicles. I think we have already seen quite a few that has been on market and is actively running and in operations. I would say that in general, there's two types of EV vehicles for referred. One is really the retrofit. So it is an existing vehicle that we try to put in some form of an EV fuel backup for it, or it could be a brand new one that is actually factory fitted. Again, a few weeks ago, there is an article by Honsian Evolution that has launched the first factory fit EV truck into Singapore with a range of about 230 kilometers in the effort to put in more green transport into Singapore. I am sure there will be more to come. This is a topic that is up and coming. I think everyone is really trying our efforts because Singapore do have a target to reach net zero carbon emission by 2050. Governments and various agencies are also in talks to put out tenders to see how, as an industry, we can move ahead. Now, with what I have said, now, what are some of the mitigation measures that we as SME have tried to put together? So in terms of security, I would say that it's really a stopgap measure just to meet the minimum requirements. As an SME, I think a lot of support is required. For example, enforcement during the loading and unloading process within the facilities. So this could be maybe for the mall operators or for the landlords to ensure food security at the loading and unloading bay. And in terms of limited storage space, I would say that all of us are really working within whatever limited constraints we have. I think it would be great to have some guidelines to help sustain the requirements purely from a food safety point. That is not being done today, and we hope to be able to see, I would say, more of that guidelines to help SME in that area. In terms of last mile delivery, I feel that as a SME, we are always optimizing our operations. So accessibility to market-wide optimization is definitely the way to go, where different establishments can collaborate to be able to do a more optimized solution. I would say like Foodpanda, Grab, all these are really the fourth player in this field, to see how, as an independent person, we can do more market-wide optimization, which will not only do good for SME, but also industry as a whole. I would say the last one, in terms of sustainability, really the industry do have to come together, or the country do have to come together to make sure that each one of us actually take a small step forward together. If not, I would say that as an individual company or individual establishment, there's only this much we can do for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. a very good kickstart of this discussion, because you're giving all of us, irrespective of in this industry or a user of this, because I see some of those questions came in from the participant, which we'll discuss that later on, to see what are the best practices we are able to provide and support our customers, our country, as well as for the practitioner in making through this delivery. So it's very good view to see from the ground up, as well as how SME are playing a part in that, because we need SMEs to thrive and be able to continue to support. Now, coming up next, I will invite Mark Tan, General Manager of Martin Brower Singapore, to address his views in working with very stringent requirements of multinationals, and also how to ensure that we as consumer are safe on the things that deliver literally to our plates, are safe all the way from the origin part. And Mark has been in this industry for decades, and I won't review how much, otherwise you start guessing his age. He looks very young and energetic. And he comes from backgrounds of transporting very sensitive example of oil, gas, technology, food service through his career. So without further ado, I hand over to Mr. Mark Tan, General Manager, Martin Brower Singapore. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Edward, for the introduction. Okay, so we'll be sharing our slides in a short while. Alan, do you have the slides on?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
Can you guys see our screen? If you can put it on presentation mode. All right. Again, thank you for having us on board here to share our experiences, and then of course participants for spending your time. Next, please. So I will skip this through with the very good introduction from Edward earlier on. Thank you. Yep. So a little bit about Martin Brower, right? As a company, we are basically headquartered in US, and we belongs under the Reyes Holdings group. And in US, we operate actually a beer distribution under another branding, and we also do distribution for QSR industry under the Martin Brower branding. And of course, we are also a Coca-Cola bottler in US as well. Great. Next slide, please. So in Asia, right, we are actually our footprint is in South Korea and Singapore. And in my home ground, Singapore, right, we actually serve 3 brands currently, which is McDonald's, Five Guys, and Subway. So they are predominantly in a QSR arena. Yeah. Okay. Next, Helen. Yep. So today I feel pretty much refreshed, very different from 3 years back, I would say. Like, it's more back to norm, but then, as a logistic practitioner, it's kind of like a deja vu, right? The pain is coming back. Like, this is a very familiar sight for me right now. I guess even though it's a hybrid work arrangement, but I would say 80% of population are now going back to the offices, and you're seeing this very familiar sight. And if you go back down another slide, Alan. So as logistic practitioner, this is actually now what we are facing every day when we go to our delivery locations. You'll see all the loading bays, occupied. Yeah. So next, Alan. Thank you. Yeah. So I want to share in general common things that we are facing. And again, my philosophy or our philosophy is really doing the simple things within our control. Right. So if you talk about traffic condition, really is something that we can't control. It literally lead to late deliveries to our customers. We will face extended work hours, right, with our driver. And I would say, as a company operating a transportation fleet, we need to be very agile, to be very aware of what's the traffic condition out there, because it can change anytime, right? A moment a traffic accident happen, especially we have a very notorious expressway in Singapore, tunnel, right? CTE. Something happen, and then you can be caught in a jam for almost an hour or even more than that. So my encouragement is, for us to operate a fleet, it's always good to be very aware of the traffic conditions for the locations that you're going to. And we have easily available technology today with Google Map. Yeah, so we should be using those technology. Next up, building designs, again, something that we can't control. It can lead to asset damage. When the truck knock onto a building, we can have long waiting time because of access, and eventually it's going to inconvenience the public. So what we do is usually we prefer to go to a new location, right? We will do our recce. We will go and explore what's the entrance. And if it's something challenging, then we'll put in some mitigation factors or actions. Otherwise, we will explore alternative loading spots, right? This probably Alan can share something later about one particular challenging spot that we visit. Next up, weather elements again. Today is again something not within our control, and with the global warming, and we see very unusual weather. Like just yesterday, it was so sunny in the morning. Suddenly, all of a sudden, in the afternoon, the heavy rain comes. And this is going to be especially challenging for locations without shelter, right? And that's where we cannot do any unloading because that will cause damage to the products. So again, regular check of routing traffic conditions. And again, if you know that the rain is coming and you are going to be going to a location without shelter, I think we should just be agile and do a detour. Just also another advice, right? I do think we have an app in terms of NEA, right? Which also give us more or less a visibility of the weather condition. So that could help in terms of our transport planning. Right, and then next up, client operating hours. Again, we've talked about more, right? It's kind of fixed. There's nothing much we can do. Of course, we do have customers who are 24 hours operation that will actually help offset the peak hours and allow us to have longer window of deliveries. Otherwise, if there are certain limitations, I guess the only way for us to overcome is really to spend money to allocate dedicated resource so that we can get the delivery done within the client's expectation. Another one, which I think Kelly has also mentioned earlier on, right? The footprint for our business owner. Again, in landscape Singapore, every square feet counts. So we have different customers that we have today who don't mind paying for space because they want guests to be comfortable. We have brands that is particularly strategized on small footprint, right? Maybe it could be more of a grab and go concept. So it's very small footprint, which means they also have very little storage area, which then creates that requirement for us to have very frequent deliveries to them. Yep. And again, when there's constraint, we have to allocate dedicated resources, right? Or otherwise, we do have to work with customers to try and do delivery during off-peak hours. But yet again, it's not easy, because it's kind of linked to labor constraint, right? If I were to go to them early in the morning where there's no traffic, they will be telling me they don't have staff in the restaurants. So again, that's something we need to work out with our clients. Which then comes to the last point. Labor crunch again is, I think it's across the board. It doesn't only affect the F&B, the retail, it also affects the logistic. And I do think we have more challenges as a logistic industry, right? Because lucky or not, we are classified under service, which then put us on the same platform as the banks. And then we have limitation in terms of the nationality of people that we can employ, right? As compared to, some of our partners that we do know, they are predominantly also doing logistics, but they have other kinds of operating license like manufacturing license that allows them a bigger pool of labor from our neighboring countries. All right, next slide, Alan, thank you. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I think it's important that we need to strike a balance between the many requests from clients. Again, to me, a problem that money can solve is not a problem, right? But at the end of the day, every business is about the bottom line, right? How much profit, and like it or not, we are always at the receiving end now. It's for us to make it as competitive as possible for our clients. So going downwards, right, I will be sharing some case studies that we have in Singapore, which could be a reference for other countries, which is interesting, but yet I find it also challenging. Yeah. Alan, next slide. Thank you. Yeah. So some food for thoughts, which I think we can explore. We need to really strategize, right? Like if we go to a mall, so typically what do you see in a mall? You have all the F&Bs, you have your grocery, which is your supermarket, you have fashion and retail. I think from a logical perspective, there should be allocation of time slot for different type of businesses, because I think what is time sensitive is really the grocery and F&B, whereas for the fashion retail, probably it's not that time sensitive. So this is something I think as an industry we can consider. And again, next one, which is quite close to what we are talking about for the first point, right? A priority for perishables because of the sensitiveness of the product, be it a frozen meat, be it a fresh produce in terms of vegetables, right? It is sensitive, and as what Kelly mentioned early on, with that frequent opening and closing of the reefer truck, it tends to cause a rise in the temperature. And again, it depends on your customers. Some customers are so stringent that they have specific requirements of the products when it reaches them, and if it doesn't reach that requirement, the products gets rejected. So the other point that we think about is consolidation hub for smaller retailers. Like today we have smaller brands or standalone operator, right, where they also need deliveries to their shops. But what we're thinking is, could there then be an opportunity for a consolidation hub for all these different retailers? Again, the constraint is every businesses have their own preference, and then they could end up like you have more than 10 different service providers. So how do we then get all these 10 service providers to agree to, send their products to a common hub and get a hub to do the last mile delivery to that mall? And the last point that we think is going to be helpful is receiving hours beyond standard time, right? Which again, very dependent on the client. Like we have client who operates 24 hours, then we are able to do deliveries in the midnight, right? When everyone else is sleeping, but we are actually still operating. Whereas for the conventional traditional business, more operating hours is typically 10 a.m. to probably 10 p.m. And then sometimes the employees will come in 1 hour earlier. So that makes it 9 a.m. So the earliest time you can do a delivery is actually 9 a.m. Right? That is actually a very small window for me. Right. Next, Alan, case study, which I have. I'll just run this through briefly, right? So based on our research, in Singapore, we have this interesting operating model in a mall at the northeast part of Singapore, right? Where I think they run the mall loading bay more like a logistic warehouse, right? Where they have a dedicated company that comes in and operate the unloading bay. So what happens is when a supplier comes in, they will straight unload and hand it over to the company that's operating a loading bay, so that the supplier can then straight away move off to their next location. So if you look at it, right, we have never done a time study, but if you look at it, how much time really do we need to do a delivery? Like when you go there, you unload, and then you move the products up to a shop and coming back down. So to me, a lot of time I actually spend queuing, waiting for a slot. After you unload, I have to use my own delivery attendant, move my products up to the shop, wait for the manager or whoever is available, come out, do the check, do the count. And some customer require us to put away the products onto the shelving, right? So these are all time. And while I'm doing all this, my truck is parked at the loading bay, and deprive the next supplier of the opportunity to come in and do the unloading. So it is something I think it's a workable model, but then again, I'm sure they come at a cost, and I don't know what cost it is, but it's something viable for more to consider. How do we allow trucks to turn around faster, right? In terms of loading bay, it could be in terms of design, allow unloading, but then they can straight away move off to a waiting area until delivery is complete, and then they can come back down and move off. Okay, next case study, which we have in Singapore. This is something done by URA. And again, I do think on paper planning is logical, right? This is more applicable for what I mentioned about smaller retailers, right? You can have more than 10 suppliers, you can have more than 10 logistics players, but they're all going to that same location. So does it make sense that, we then deliver all their deliveries to a central hub, and then to have that central hub consolidate, and just instead of 10 trucks now going to the mall, we may only have 3 to 4 trucks going to the mall. So that will help ease the traffic around the shopping mall area, right? But then again, if we are going to put a hub nearby, then I don't think it makes sense, because you are still, needing all your trucks to move to the area nearby. So typically in Singapore, all our logistic hub are more of the, I would say, not in the downtown area. So it's either in the far west or up north, right, which is mainly our food hub, and then of course in the eastern part of Singapore. Yeah. So with this, I think I have one final sharing before I hand over to Alan. Yeah. So to me, there is a lot of brilliant ideas out there, but it's really bringing people together. It's a mind share thing, right? You have all your business owners, and then you have your trade association, you have your government agency, and then we have our building landlords. I think it's important to bring people together, have a mind share, and really strategize, come up with a sustainable, viable strategy. I think if we can improve 80% of traffic that's going to the mall today, which I truly believe is our big chain stores, our bigger fashion brands, and the supermarket, I think that will really help ease the traffic that we have, the traffic condition that we have today. Yep. So I think with this, I will complete my sharing and hand over the time to Alan.
Thank you, Mark. That's very, very refreshing to share with us the day-to-day, truly behind the scene operation that you all are working diligently to ensure that for us as a consumer, as a retail operator, we're able to see the things that you have all working through. Like the typical analogy, maybe people said that it's almost watching the duck swimming across the pond. It was so graceful and smooth, but at the bottom, the little feet were paddling very, very quickly to go through the things. So that's very important. And the key thing from your sharing, the takeaway is it takes multiple parties to collaborate, because you can't have one person or one party doing this. We need everyone to transform, because Singapore is transforming. We need all of these to work together in a private-public sector collaboration in doing that. So now next up is continue on with Alan. Alan, he has over decades of logistic transportation industry in the cross-functional logistician. He's doing many things, from his over decades of career in the local and multinational MNC logistic company operations. So these are really hands-on as a practitioner on a day-to-day, seeing the things happening. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Alan to share his learning and advice and best practices to us. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Edward. I hope you guys can hear me because I'm actually toggling the screen. Okay, once again, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to some of you guys who are dialing from different time zones. So, okay, understand that there are, I think, 100 over questions that are actually being contributed by the participants today. So, decided to trim my slides to just 5 for my short sharing. So, there will be a 3-minute slide at the later stage. So, hopefully, you guys can see it and also hear it. I'll probably need Edward's help to just do a double check if everyone can see the screen and also hear the sound. Okay, so basically, I will also try to narrate because this video is pretty recent and I'm just sharing from the for everyone's and I will narrate at pattern at the back end. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Can you guys still see the screen?
We can see your case 1 challenge to execute. That's the screen we see.
Okay. Let me try again. Okay. Does it work now?
Yes, we see the browser screen.
Okay, good, awesome. Okay, just a quick 3 minutes. Okay, I'm sure some of you may have seen this before. So basically, right, this is the actual live case or live delivery between the urban logistics. The MRT station, no, sorry, the shopping retail mall and the nearby neighborhood locations. Okay, this is a location in Woodlands Avenue 2. Okay, so basically, right, which you can't see, there's a nearby MRT station. So this resident or member of the public is saying that it's very noisy at the back end because there are deliveries, ongoing deliveries from morning until evening time.
This is a backdrop to Singapore Sunday. Suppose they have a peaceful of sleep. So
So these are some of the signages that were put up. So members of the public are actually commenting that drivers are actually throwing down the cargos, the trolleys from the lorry. So in summary, there are mixed, I would say, feedbacks from the members of the public regarding staying near for convenience and also accepting the fact that there are some deliveries from this convenience that they are getting. Okay, let me try this. Okay, I'm actually back to the presentation mode. Please let me know if you can see. Is it all good?
Yes, we can see your screen. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So basically, right. Moving on. I mean, when I was first actually approached by Kelly, which is one of the co-speakers, I thought I would just dialing in and probably just listen while eat my breakfast. So not until Edward started saying, then I know that breakfast is not possible and I have to on my camera and start talking. So I thought a lot of information had been shared by Mark and also Kelly earlier on. To be honest, comparing myself with all the friends here, we probably combined 1,000 years of working experience in the industry. I'm not sure whether my case studies maybe will be able to shed some light or bring some hearts together. But I'm very sure that everyone will have their own stories to tell. So so basically, right, this is a live case study, actually near Clementi Mall. So between this proximity, okay, this mall and this residential area, which is about 120 meters here also. So basically, right, this is the location that we are actually supposed to deliver. I would say the delivery frequency currently is about 6 cycles per week. That means we are going to this location 6 times a week to deliver to this particular restaurant. So this is another view, okay, of the mall. So basically, as you can see, right, it's an extended view. So if we are going to park our truck around here, okay, I mean, this is one of the many locations that we are able to park our trucks. Okay, of course, there's also a loading bay at this particular mall. But then again, the restaurant is just here. So to ease the time or to reduce the time, there is always some opportunity cost that we should consider. Okay, so just to give everyone a perspective, turning in here is the interchange. Okay, so currently, this could be one of the locations that the truck can be parked in order to access the, I would say the drop-off point, which is just about 50 meters away. Okay, of course, is there another option? Okay, same thing. There's a delivery location over here, and this is another street view, which is near to the Clementi MRT station. If you guys can see over here. So over here, right, there's a bus stop. In fact, if we park the truck around this area, that is another possibility to actually deliver to the restaurant. Of course, it's about 300 meters. So what does a competent authority such as NEA says about switching on our trucks during our delivery? So basically, right, as what has been pointed, we are delivering temperature sensitive products. So these temperature sensitive products, right, we have to maintain that safety aspect or the quality aspect. So our system will have to be switched on despite switching off the engine sound. But this sound could create some unnecessary or some noise, especially if we deliver in the night. Yep, this is where I would say the dilemma between delivery in the night and in the daytime. I'm sure many of you would have experienced that. Okay, so in terms of the legislation, what does the law say then? Okay, so basically, right, I've taken a screenshot from .gov.sg. So in the aspect of the location where we do our loading, so in the within the 9 meters, it is not allowed because at all times. So how about stopping just in front of the turning point into the interchange? Okay, so this is the area where restriction of stopping or parking of vehicles to unload and load cargoes. So there are some time restrictions. So in other words, can I park during those hours that are not actually restricted? Okay, so currently this is where I'm actually talking about. This is the location of the truck that is actually parked during the non-restricted hours, and it is usually after 12 midnight to this particular location. Yep. Okay, of course, there are also some cost impact on the option. So in fact, I think everyone has this dilemma. Okay, whenever there's a member of public giving a feedback, be it to the NEA or to the Singapore Police Force for noise, such as the one that I shared at the Woodlands. Okay, so every location would have its own approved delivery method. Like for example, okay, can we deliver or park our truck along the road? Okay, from the loading bay. Okay, in fact, this particular location has a loading bay. Okay, but then again, all this come with a specific cost that will be eventually passed on to the consumer like us if we are a customer of their restaurant, or it would actually increase the operating cost of any businesses. So with all this, it all boils down to whether the consumer or the businesses itself is willing to take up this extra cost. Okay, so I'm not too sure whether you guys also facing these challenges during the delivery execution. Okay, so again, this feature has been reduced many times because I would say this would be one of the busier mall in Singapore. Okay, so actually there are a lot of other malls which can only accommodate 2 to 3 trucks, and They are basically, for example, Lot 1, Hougang Mall, Hillion Mall. These are some of the many examples because the restaurants that we are delivering actually are located in more than about 150 locations in Singapore, spread all over Singapore. So how do we turn around the trucks in order to actually share the limited loading base with more than 160 tenants, for example, in this Tampines Mall? Because at any point of time, maximum 2 to 3 trucks are actually allowed for unloading. Okay, so another food for thoughts, what do you think the drivers will do when these unloading areas are actually occupied and the wait is too long? So basically, right, in all aspects, drivers being drivers, they will just move around, okay? So either they wait, if not, they move to the next location. But some of the receiving areas have time-sensitive requirements. For example, do not come during my meal time, my busy time. So this will lead to a lot of, I would say, friction between the businesses and the service providers in the long run. Okay, I guess this particular report was also shared by Mark earlier on regarding the new system implemented at this particular area. So another challenge that most of the drivers or the delivery team will face will be the loading base at all those neighborhood areas, which are not very, I would say, trolley friendly or cage friendly. For example, there are no curbs, there are no steps. So some of the areas are that we have observed or have our share to actually experiences to deliver to will be Hougang 10, Keat Hong, and many other areas, including Geylang East Central. So again, where should the driver push his trolley or roll cage to his destination? Okay, so of course, also shared by Kelly, basically like sometimes the drivers do not move around. They queue like most of us when there's a good restaurant, they queue. Okay, but queuing outside the malls may result in fines. And one good example would be Bukit Panjang Plaza, which usually the malls are busy, especially loading base, and there will be a lot of trucks at different times of the day queuing to actually unload the cargoes. But then again, you will also see our favorite Cisco or Certis walking around, I think, issuing parking ticket to all these truck drivers. Okay, so I think from Kelly to Mark, I think there are a lot of, I think, requests or thoughts to, in case there are any representative from the various state boards. Have we actually thought of relaxing the hiring constraints, especially when our delivery or transportation industry will have minimal chances of automation? I'm not against technology, but then again, this is something that is the true side of most of the transportation companies now. I mean, just an example, the youngest team member on my transportation team who has stayed for more than 1 year is actually in his 30s now. So I'm just wondering, in the next 20 years, where our transportation industry will be if we do not start working on some of the identified areas that actually prevent us from executing the job well and to maintain the cost so that the purchase will not be impacting everyone down the road. So that would be the end of my sharing. So I guess actually a bit of time. I'll just give back the time back to Edward.
Thank you, Alan. These are most prevalent as well as live examples and cases that you share with us. I would want to use this balance 5-6 minutes to open up the floor for questions and all of that. So first up, our chairman, Mr. Kramjit Singh, he has some questions and comments he would like to share. Kramjit.
Thank you, Edward. I'm more of a comment rather than a question. I think I really appreciate the insight that particularly Mark and Alan have given. And of course, Kelly had alluded to some of the things. The issue is the context in which this growth in e-commerce, particularly in regard to the food F&B industry, has taken off compared to, say, 10, 20 years ago. And secondly, there's a conflict in terms of the design of buildings that were done 20, 30 years ago, the old malls, for want of a better word, and the new malls. And some of these ideas that are coming out now, the innovations, have not kept pace with the changes in the growth of industry. That's where the conflict is. But it doesn't mean that these problems should be washed away. I think it's not just the traffic congestion, but I think we also have to see the bigger picture, because policymakers tend to concentrate on passenger comfort. So it's more bus, SMRT. So in terms of traffic management, car light policies is the overarching overriding policies. I think the issue is how to pay more attention to the movement of cargo. And this is why CILT has picked up this broad subject of urban logistics, so that we can have a sharper focus on not only traffic congestion, particularly how it impinges on trade, goods, and also the food chain industry. And we say retail, we haven't even touched on the other aspect of retail. We're focusing today on food, F&B industry. So you can see the micro issues related at the last mile at the mall. The Yamato example that I gave in Tampines Mall, the experiment was done a few years ago. The potential of extending things is there. So this will require a whole of government approach. Unfortunately, I think this is an area that will require a little bit more attention, and we are more than happy to work with companies like Martin and the others to build this awareness among the key players and help improve and innovate the industry so that we minimize some of the problems we have outlined. Thank you.
Thank you, Kramjit. I think it is important that we share some of these comments. I saw some of those questions came in. One of those is it is though it is a little bit early, but the thing is important. So let me read out the question from one of the participants. What do you expect from the Singapore government agency to facilitate an effective transformation in this area? And some of those ideas, because you mentioned that both in Mark, Kelly, and Ellen in your slides, that things need to be done not just from private. We do everything we can, SME, MNC, and government, so that we are able to prepare ourselves, Singapore, into the future. Because there are a number of questions, they're interlinked. What do we do from here? How are we able to share the experience, as well as drawing experience from overseas to here? So I will throw this first question to the lady, Kelly, to address and share your comments. Kelly.
I think earlier on I mentioned about the challenges by SME. I'm sure MNC has its own set of challenges as well. I feel that in order really to move the industry, it is multi-agency that really needs to come together, and it is so interlinked together that I think why we have this session. I think hopefully at the end of this session, we're going to put together whatever that's been discussed and all the questions that have to come, that has came through, or maybe some recommendations that has to be done on the multiple angle. If not, I really think that we are kind of at a standstill where we are also contradicting ourselves in terms of how we're going to move ahead.
Thanks, Kelly. Mark? Mark, please unmute.
Okay, so for a start, I think simple one, right? Things like, our labor crunch. Can our MOM look at giving us a little bit of leeway in terms of differentiating the logistics from a service industry, like just instead of us being a general service industry, but allow us to have a wider pool of applicants, right? Because typically I think we are restricted by only Malaysia, right? That's the typical one. But if we want to get from somewhere else, we can't. So I think that's one challenge that I feel we can easily resolve if they will try and differentiate between the service industry. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Other points, I think we have just a couple of minutes left since we have Mark on the screen. Mark, anything you want to share with the audience for the takeaway before we wrap up?
I think for me, my takeaway is more of, it's really a joint effort. Today, again, the logistic industry is always doing our best within our many constraints, within our operating costs, right, to try and make things happen. So it's really about how much the business owner are willing to pay right, to just make things a little bit better, right? So even just now, that kind of example where you go to a mall, you drop off, and then you move on, right? I'm sure the business owner has to pay another additional cost, but it doesn't mean that we can afford to charge them lower, right? Because like it or not, I have to still put in the same number of people. I have to use the same truck. I have to use the same time, right? Just to go to that location and drop off the stuff. Maybe the only thing that I save is the waiting time, right? I can just go drop off and move on. But literally, there is not much of savings to our resources, and unfortunately, I have to say, as a logistic company, we still have to put up the same kind of pricing to the customer, right? But at the end of the day, how much, if you look at the end-to-end cost, there are a lot of things that is hidden. It's just that to a business owner, it's always about that dollar and cents. Yeah. So I do hope, we can move beyond the typical Asian mindset and be willing to, pay that slight premium just to make life easier.
Thank you, Mark. Let's hand it over to Ellen. Your takeaway point for our participants.
Well, that's a tough one. Okay, so basically, I will not take everyone's time. So I think everyone said that Singapore is small, but then again, are we agile? And I believe so, because with all the authorities are coming in to actually to help. And I guess as what team had separately texted, can we raise the cost? Can we raise the salary? Or even can we actually see ways how to do this? But I think for any process to be I was successful, the giver, okay, for example, the one that's giving the service, for example, people like us, Martin Brown or Oni or all other transportation friends, and the one that is taking it, which is the business, can they review the process to make it more efficient, more, I would say, more productive and less painful for service providers like us, right, to actually deliver? For example, instead of ordering by piece, you order by case. So we reduce our carbon footprint at the same time, we can also reduce the transportation costs. So I think it's a both way. Both ways have to come together to meet and change the perception. Or industry players work together that this is the only way that we can deliver. This is the only way that we can receive. Then we find I would say, a midpoint solution to address everyone's requirements. That would be my takeaway. Yep.
Thank you, Ellen. Very, very, very valid points. Besides what Tim talked about, all of that, and the other comment coming in is how can we, going forward, have technology support and try to help all of us to be more efficient. Kelly, over to you for the final comment on the takeaway point.
I think for me, what Mark and Ellen said really makes sense, right? But what is it that we can start doing today is really stop doing sub-optimization. I think that is what is happening in the market. Each one of us is trying our best within our limited constraints and ability. And there's only this much that we can do as an individual. So how can we look at market-wide, industry-wide, sector-wide, country-wide, maybe region or location-wide? Just stop doing sub-optimization, but rather look at a more wide scope optimization to elevate all the challenges that we are facing so that each one of us get a win-win in the situation or in the solutions that we have put forth together.
Thank you, Kelly. Very valid points. Sorry, I overrun by a few minutes, but I think that because the sharing is so informative and the interaction is so active. So I thank everyone for joining us today. And I look at the participant, almost everyone signed on, stayed through the entire session. Apologies for not able to address all the questions to the speakers. What I promise is to have all these questions that you posted, be typed it out and sent to all the speakers so that they're able to address them in writing. What we'll do is thereafter, we'll put it back on our CILT Singapore website so that you're able to look through that. I also want to do a little bit of introduction. Our next session up for the urban logistic transport is on freight transportation. The topic to that will be moving of heavy goods and commodity between distribution parks, between airport, seaport and cross-border, which is something which is slightly one step on the upstream of today's mall and retail, because unless you're able to move that in, we are unable to fit Mark, Ellen, or Kelly and onto our table that we are consuming. So that's the next subject. I'm going to give you a prelude. It will be in the middle of June, so look out to our CILT website. It's planned for mid of June. And we have already confirmed some very distinguished speakers and practitioners to share with us. So what I would do is I would thank everyone for your participation, especially to our speaker, lady first, Kelly Tan, Mark Tan, Ellen Ang, to join us. And for all the participants who have signed up and stayed through the entire presentation and webinar, please look out to our upcoming website for the recording as well as for this information. For members only, you'll be able to access today's presentation from our CILT archive page. So thanks again. Thank you very much and have a very fruitful week as well as great weekend. Thank you very much. See you next time.